the 5th and final Halloween video of this year. This show has plagued me for 10 years of my life because child me thought this was a new show and there would be a season 2 someday. It was not a new show and there will never be another season to the show, and that haunts my dreams. Not just because it has ghosts in it. I was so attached to this show. This is my first disappointment in my life. Anyway, enjoy. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo is a 7 TV show in the Scooby-Doo franchise. It started in 1985 and, as I mentioned earlier, only had 1 season with 13 episodes, making it the shortest ever Scooby-Doo show. This series only included 3 out of 5 of the Mystery Gang members, Shaggy, Daphne, and obviously Scooby-Doo, because how could you make a show in the Scooby-Doo universe without Scooby? That would be crazy. Fred and Velma were off doing other things, so they were not a part of this. In the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, Daphne takes on a lot of traits from both Velma and Fred and becomes the leader of the group, while Scooby and Shaggy remain the same. Also in this show is Scrappy, who is a very divisive character.
You're dealing with Scrappy-Doo now. Prepare to splat!
A lot of people hated him. I was indifferent to his character. He is the nephew of Scooby-Doo and starred alongside his uncle in many shows and also appeared in the live-action Scooby-Doo movies. This show also introduces one of my favourite characters, Flim Flam. He's a resourceful kid who meets the gang in the first episode. He often gets the gang out of trouble with his magic tricks, sale pitches, or his sleight of hand.
No, give him the old Flim Flam.
The last great addition to this show is Vincent Van Gogh, who they also meet early on in the show. He is a warlock who assists Scooby and his friends throughout the show and helps them achieve their goal. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo was the first time Shaggy wore the legendary red shirt. All of the other human members of the Scooby Gang changed their clothes, but Shaggy's red shirt is the most dramatic change. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo is not the only time Shaggy wears this shirt. He also wears it in Scooby Meets the Boo Brothers, Scooby and the Ghoul School, Scooby and the Reluctant Werewolf, and briefly in Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase. There was not concrete reasoning for this brief change in attire for Shaggy, but it was not a hated change, it was just different. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo is one of the few versions of Scooby-Doo, be that TV or movie, where the monsters are real. In fact, it was the second show to have actual monsters, the first being the new Scooby-Doo Mysteries. Others on that list are Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers, Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf. Those were all in the 80s. After that, they kept bringing back real monsters, such as in Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase, Scooby-Doo Witch's Ghost, Scooby-Doo and the Goblin King, and even that questionable movie Scoob had real monsters, and that trend of real monsters being crucial to shows started in the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. I'm now going to cover the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. I'm not going to talk about every episode, just my favourite episodes or episodes I deem important world-building ones. The first episode of the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo is called To All the Ghouls I Loved Before, a play on the song To All the Girls I Loved Before, which was a popular song in the 80s. The episode starts with these two ghosts, Boogle and Weird, who lived in this Himalayan temple. They want to open the chest of demons, which holds the 13 most powerful ghosts in existence, and if they were to get out, the world would be doomed. The chest can only be opened by living beings, and somehow Weird managed to trap the stupid mortals who might open the chest for them. And here are those stupid mortals now. Up in the air is Daphne, Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy, flying a plane looking for Hawaii, and for some reason, the 2 humans left the dog to navigate. They ended up in the Himalayas because, surprisingly, dogs don't read very well, and Weird uses magic to make their plane crash. Simultaneously, the little boy called Flim Flam is being chased by an angry mob for scamming people with his lots of luck joy juice, which he claims will solve most problems. As the plane crashes, Flim Flam jumps on to get away from the mob, but that escape is short-lived and they're all arrested and ordered to leave the town before nightfall. But when they go back to where they left their plane, it is gone, with tracks leading to the temple, but the door is locked. Flim Flam takes them back to the town and they meet Vincent Van Gogh, who uses crystal ball to see that the plane is in the temple, but it's also with the chest of demons, and he tells them not to go in there. Vincent also gives them this small, useful piece of information that everyone in the town, apart from them, is cursed to turn into a werewolf at nightfall. They all think he's crazy because at this point in the Scooby-Doo lore, they have never really encountered concrete evidence that actual monsters exist. It's normally just businessmen in masks because capitalism is the true criminal.
They know!
Too bad. Now we can never let them leave.
They all start believing when the townsfolk trick Daphne to drinking wolfbane, which turns her into a werewolf. They all manage to flee the town with werewolf Daphne, and Flim Flam's lots of luck joy juice actually worked and cured Daphne.
That stuff really works, Flim Flam. You heard it, folks. Another satisfied customer.
So with one less canine in the group, they all head to the temple. Long story short, these 2 idiots without 13 ghosts. Flim Flam cures the town of their werewolf curse, and we find out that said curse was placed on them for trapping the 13 ghosts in the first place, and that was a way to punish them. Vincent rocks up angry. They let out the 13 ghosts and tells them they need to return them to the chest because they are the ones who let them out, or the world will be, as I mentioned earlier, doomed. The episode ends with Flim Flam joining the gang and Vincent agreeing to help recapture all the the ghosts. I still have no idea why the chest of demons is filled with ghosts. They never explain that. Skipping ahead a few episodes to the 4th episode, which is called Reflections in a Ghoulish Eye, Scooby and the gang have caught a few ghosts at this point. Maldor, the Malevolent, and Queen Morbidia. In this episode, the gang have arrived at a paranormal convention to look for one of the 13 ghosts. Boogle and Weird are working with the mirror ghost called the Reflector Spectre, and they set up camp in the room where the gang will be staying so they can trap them in the mirror when they come in. But before the gang can arrive, the hotel maid arrives and gets sucked into the mirror. And before they have even arrived at the room, Scooby and the gang are being blamed for kidnapping her, and they have to flee the hotel and find out what actually happened to her. Turns out Scooby and the gang are famous for their ghost hunting at this point, and they run into fans Sandy and Selma.
Say, aren't you Scooby-Doo, the world-famous ghost chaser?
Who are selling crystal balls, which Vincent uses to tell the gang that one of the 13 ghosts are in their region at the convention, and they need to find an amulet that is used to stop him.
The amulet of Ishkabibble.
How much do you want for it?
Only your happiness.
The gang eventually get trapped in the mirror, and the amulet has writing that is backwards before, and it's now legible because they are trapped in the mirror, and they use it to escape and free everyone that was captured in the mirror, including this poor innocent maid who was just doing her job. She is probably traumatized. This is one of the episodes that I vividly remember. I mainly remember Boogle and Weird running around with the mirror, but this was one of my favorite episodes as a kid.
Why the crazy get-up?
My presence here might have scared off the demon.
Skipping to the 6th episode, which is The Ship of the Ghouls. This episode contains Scooby's first mental breakdown of the series. Surprisingly, not the only one, considering it's only 13 episodes long, but he has multiple. Due to Scooby's declining mental state, they decide to go on a cruise, but Vincent thinks they should be focusing on capturing the ghost. Despite their relaxing environment, Scooby is still stressed, so Flim Flam hypnotizes him, which leads Scooby to laughing anytime anything scary happens instead of responding with fear. The gang eventually learn that they got onto a ghost ship that sunk over 50 years ago, and that all the rest of the passengers and crew are ghosts, and they plan to travel to the Bermuda Triangle to re-sink the ship. Then Vincent calls them to tell them even more bad news, that if the chest of demons entered the Bermuda Triangle, it will open itself. So we got some new chest lore, and while all this awful stuff is happening, they are running from a ship full of ghosts, and Scooby is just laughing at all this. The usual antics occur, they defeat the ghost, and the ship disappears, and Scooby and the gang escape in their rubber duck boat. This is also an interesting episode because it is heavily debated which of the ghosts is the 13th ghost in this episode. Some people think it's the captain, some people think it's the boat, and others think it was the Saigon ghost that appeared once they reached the Bermuda Triangle. Next we have the 8th episode, which is called When You Wish Upon a Star. This was one of my favourite episodes in the series because it introduced us to the Brewski sisters, who are these trio of incompetent witches tasked by Marcella, one of the 13 ghosts, who got trapped in the spirit world after escaping the chest, which orders the Brewski sisters to free her using a spell. The main reason I remember these three is because they had a dance that they always did, and the second they started singing the song that goes with it, it unlocked a very vivid memory. I love this episode. It was so fun.
We're so hot, we're out of sight. Come in. Na, 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 na.
We are also introduced to Edizabeth, who is a servant of Marcella, and he's the cutest thing ever, and I love him, and I need a plushie of him right now. Up next is the 9th episode, which is called It Is a Wonderful Scoob, which is home to Scooby's second mental breakdown. After running into the 13 ghosts of the episode, which is Time Slime, Scooby ends up getting captured and traumatized. Vincent saves them all, but Scooby is done with monsters, mysteries, and ghosts, and quits the gang and moves into his parents' house. I'm not sure who gave these dogs a mortgage or what they do for work, but apparently they have a house. This episode is slightly confusing because it makes it seem like them hunting for ghosts is some form of reality show. It's not the first time in the series it has been implied. In the 2nd episode, it was implied parents were complaining Scooby was getting into too many dangerous situations, so they needed to get rid of this dragon that was breathing fire because that's dangerous. Scrappy had to stand up for this dragon's rights to be in the show.
You hate dragons. You want to cut off this honest, self-respecting dragon and put him out of work.
It was a minute long bit, so I don't think too much about it, but in this episode, it is implied the entire time there is some form of film crew following Scooby and the gang, broadcasting it on TV for children around the world. And when Scooby leaves the gang, ratings fall in this show, and children go on hunger strike in anger of Scooby leaving. So they try and replace him with this dog called Bernie Gumshaw, but that made the audience even angrier. The gang, along with Bernie, continue to look for the ghost, Time Slime, and they get captured.
Or I'll pulverize you!
Getting pulverized isn't in my contract.
Just before they are defeated, Vincent Mangle freezes in time and teleports Scooby to the future to show him what happens to his friends if he does not return to the gang.
You may defeat me, Time Slime, but mark my words, one day Scooby-Doo will return!
After seeing the horrifying future, Scooby comes back and saves the day and rejoins the gang. This was clearly inspired by It's a Wonderful Life. These guys were going through it in the future. The 10th episode is called Scooby in Wacky Land. Scooby and the gang get trapped in a newspaper. It's not that different of an episode, but in the funny pages of this newspaper, they meet Platypus Duck, who helps them escape the newspaper.
A mixed up mammal and a crazy cluck. Quack, quack, quack. A Come, platypus duck.
This is the most you will ever hear about a platypus outside of Phineas and Ferb. The final ever episode of the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo is called Horror Scope Scoob. The gang end up at a TV studio owned by one of Vincent's old school friends, where we learn Vincent graduated in the year 36. The chest of demons is stolen in this episode, and they travel around trying to track it down. They capture the ghost of the episode, making it to number 12. Then the series ends. There is no second season. In this series, there are two main machines they use to travel all around the world. One of them is the mystery flying machine, which is where we first see our heroes. I am assuming Daphne owns this because it is implied in most media that her parents are really well off. They also have their own version of the mystery machine, which is a high-tech six-wheeled van that often deploys a giant rubber duck. The giant rubber duck appears a lot. This van also appears in Ghoul School, where it's just Shaggy and Scooby. There were a few inconsistencies in the 13 episodes. In the first episode, the citizens of Yugoslavia, which is a Himalayan town they found the chest in, they said the werewolf curse was put on them for imprisoning the 13 ghosts, but for the rest of the season, Vincent is credited for imprisoning them, and several of the ghosts even blame Vincent for them being in the chest. In the episode It's a Wonderful Scoob, they appear to have forgotten one of the key rules of the show, that only the living can open the chest because Time Slime opens it. That is the foundation of the show. The show was ultimately cancelled and replaced with a pup named Scooby-Doo. With only 12 out of the 13 ghosts being caught, fans around the world have been left to wonder what happened to the 13th ghost. As I mentioned before, I have spent a good portion of my life wondering how the show would have ended if they knew they were only going to get one season. Would we have caught all 13 ghosts? Whilst the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo ended tragically on unresolved, in 2019, a movie was made called Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13 Ghosts. It took them 34 years to finally do a sequel and conclusion to this show. Better than nothing, I guess. Flim Flam and Vincent briefly appeared in other Scooby-Doo media other than these two 13 Ghost related movies and TV shows. Flim Flam was referenced in the Mystery Incorporated show, and Vincent also appeared in the show, but he was an actor instead of a warlock as he was presented as in the 13 Ghosts. And when he met Scooby and Shaggy, he didn't know them.
I don't believe it! You're Vincent Van Gogh!
The movie star.
In the flesh.
Which kind of didn't make sense because in the same show, they did know Flim Flam.
Oh, look! Flim Flam! 25 to life is a long stretch, even for a pre-teen con artist.
Anyway, three key characters that did not appear in this movie. The first two I'm going to talk about are Weird and Boogle, who were in basically every episode of the initial series, and they didn't appear at all. And Scrappy-Doo was also not in this movie, because for some reason, everyone hates him now, so they just decided to erase the majority of his contributions in the 13 Ghosts, just because he's now unpopular. That's why he was the villain in the Scooby-Doo live-action movie, and he even recently, in the Velma TV series, killed Velma. Going back to that scene in Mystery Incorporated where they reference Flim Flam, they also show disgust and horror at the memory of Scrappy-Doo.
I haven't seen...
Look away, Daphne. We all promised each other that we would never speak of him. Not ever.
In the opening credits for the movie, where they do a little recap to catch everyone up, Scrappy's shadow is not even there. But good news, everyone. Fred and Velma do appear in Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13 Ghosts. Before the reboot for A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, which was after the 13 Ghosts, Fred and Velma's absence was explained with Velma working for NASA,
Who's presently an apprentice research scientist with NASA!
and Fred being an author. This was shown in the new Scooby-Doo Mysteries,
Who's now an aspiring mystery writer. I'm so happy.
but later, in both Mystery Incorporated and this movie, Velma and Fred were said to be at summer camp.
Forget. I was away that year. I spent the summer tied up at trapping camp. Get it? Tied up. Trapping camp.
They completely changed the origins of the demon chest in this movie. Vincent and this guy were archaeologists and accidentally released all the 13 ghosts when they found it in some random temple. They then spent years recapturing them all again, and once they were finally all caught, Vincent and his friend were surrounded by monsters. So Vincent's friend sacrificed himself so Vincent could get away, and this has plagued Vincent since. This all happened many years ago before the present day of the movie. We see the mystery gang accidentally capture the wrong person, and this police officer tells them to quit investigating and be normal kids before they do something stupid and get arrested.
If somebody like Morgan here presses harassment charges, you're looking at prison time.
My God!
So they did. They quit. Fred sold the mystery machine, and they were selling all the other stuff, and they find this crystal ball. Used to contact Vincent. The crystal ball turns on, and Vincent begs them for help, and Daphne agrees. Fred and Velma are confused as to what is happening, since in this movie, they were at camp during the 13 Ghost era, and Daphne explains that they never mentioned the 13 Ghost stuff again after they came home, since Scooby was so traumatized by this time period, as we saw in the show when he quit.
Listen, if you're worried about Scooby, don't be. He's conquered his demons. 12 of them at least.
This movie sees the return of the Red Van, and Daphne takes the leadership role for this movie, like she did in the series. Fred is confused about what his purpose is if he is not a leader.
Come on, gang, let's...
let's follow Daphne inside.
Velma is skeptic about this ghost stuff and is determined to prove that ghosts and monsters are not real, like she normally does.
The chest of demons can only be opened by the living, because the dead don't open things. They don't do anything.
But as the movie goes on, she starts to doubt herself. We see the return of Flim Flam, who now works in the town from the first episode, and he works as a salesman for spooky stuff, all ghost hunting equipment. And we see this cute little reunion scene.
Daphne, your hair is totally different. Shaggy, I've never seen you wear a shirt that isn't red.
In this movie, it's also revealed the Demon King, Asmodeus, is actually the corrupted soul of one of Vincent's ancestors, so he feels responsible for all its misdeeds. The existence of monsters and ghosts is left ambiguous by the end of this movie. While Velma did start to believe in ghosts, the Asmodeus revealed turned her back into a non-believer, and she thinks Daphne and the others had a joint hallucination of the other 12 ghosts while she was at camp.
What are you doing?
Are you nuts?
Yeah, I mean, what if you're wrong?
Ugh, fine.
In the podcast, a podcast named Scooby-Doo with Tim Sheridan, who is the writer of Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13 Ghosts, he said that they chose to remain in the middle of whether the ghosts were real or not. So fans who thought the 13 ghost monsters were real, and fans of traditional Scooby-Doo where all the monsters are just guys in masks, would be happy. To me, it just felt like a lack of commitment. No one is saying to make all Scooby-Doo ghosts real. It just seems odd to do a sequel to a TV show from over 30 years ago where all the ghosts were all real, and to rewrite history seemingly and make it they were all just hallucinating. In the end, the 13 Ghost Stories connection to literally anything else outside of the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13 Ghosts. So making ghosts real would not affected anything to make them different from the current shows that are coming out. That's why they started making TV shows and movies with real ghosts in the 80s and 90s and in the live action movies, because Scooby-Doo became really repetitive. I just think they should have made it real. It's not like they haven't made real monsters in Scooby-Doo recently, because they have, because the movie Scoob is about Dick Dastardly opening a gateway to hell. So acting like they completely stopped making real monsters and this was a call by Warner Brothers. They changed Vincent's lore a lot in this movie. In the show, he talks about how he is thousands of years old. Then we see flashbacks in the movie where he was young with his friend. So if Vincent was young, then the temple where they found the chest should have either been new or still in construction. When he started talking about his ancestor, who was Asmodeus, I was even more confused. If he was referring to his ancestors, they would have to be the first creatures went from the ocean to land. Let's talk about the canon lore of the 13 Ghosts. The 13 Ghosts exist in the same timeline as the Boo Brothers, the Ghoul School, and the Reluctant Werewolf, as well as the show The New Scooby-Doo Mysteries, because Scooby-Doo and the gang are at least adults in that show. Since they are able to travel around the world flying a plane, they must be adults. I think the Curse of the 13 Ghosts exist in a similar timeline, not the same one though, that had similar events happen to what happened in the 13 Ghosts series, but it happened to them when they were younger, and for some reason children can travel the world, because at least when they're traveling in the Mystery Machine, you can drive legally at 16. In that timeline, that is the only way Flim Flam could have seemingly caught up to them within a year or two. Right now we have two timelines. Then in a different timeline is the Mystery Incorporated world, where Flim Flam was jailed at 13 for 25 years, and Vincent was an actor in this show. So that's the third timeline. And since Velma is so convinced real monsters and ghosts don't exist, this has to be a different reality to the one where Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost or Zombie Islands happened. So that means the 13 Ghost lore, it means that they never met the Hex Girls. But that's just what I believe in by heart. In the podcast called A Podcast Named Scooby-Doo with Tim Sheridan, he said the intended timeline of this movie, it starts with Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Then it had two side quests, a side adventure with Zombie Island and a side adventure with the 13 Ghosts. And that concluded with the Curse of the 13 Ghosts, which is even more confusing. That would mean Velma accepted zombies but could not accept ghosts. Now time to put on your tinfoil hat. Conspiracy theory that I came up with. I think the initial timeline with Scooby, Shaggy, Daphne, Flim Flam and Scrappy did off-screen they caught all 13 ghosts, but in order to do that, Scrappy sacrificed himself in some Spider-Man No Way Home type of magic, and it either removed him from existence in some world, leaving just a shadow of his memory, and that's why when Flim Flam brought him up in the 13 Ghosts, no one knew who he was.
Well, I guess the gang's all here.
Except Scrappy.
What's a Scrappy?
Or the spell corrupted everyone's memory, and that's why everyone who does remember this sweet puppy who just wanted to be like his uncle, Scooby, they remember him as a monster. This is a totally plausible theory, given in the 13 Ghosts show, the creatures in the chest put a curse on that village for imprisoning them. If those spirits believe Scrappy was responsible for imprisoning them, they would do something like this. So I think you all owe Scrappy an apology, because he saved the world by sacrificing himself, and he got hated or forgotten. Apologize now. I would also like to talk about Frank Welker, who is the only original voice actor for Scooby-Doo, still alive and in the franchise. He started off as Fred in 1969 and has been in every animated TV show and movie except for A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, where Fred was given a younger voice actor, but Will has still appeared in the series as other characters. The movie Scoob, he also didn't appear in, and he does appear in the Velma show, and he voices Fred's dad instead of Fred. Since 2002, he has been voicing Scooby-Doo as well. Even though Fred is not in this version of the show, and he was not voicing Scooby-Doo yet, he still appears in the show as the voice of Griswold and Edithsvik. That would be all. Tell me what you thought about the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, or the sequel movie. Did you like it? Were you one of the people who didn't want there to be magic in Scooby-Doo? Tell me, because I do blame you for how the movie turned out. Kidding. Goodbye.